Selamat datang and welcome to Kamunta Awakening, where we learn to awaken to our highest potential one episode at a time. I'm Yasmin, your host for today. Today, we are uncovering the life of Andreas Vogiatzakis, a man whose journey reads like a movie script. From his humble beginnings in Crete, Greece, to becoming a celebrated CEO across continents, Andres' story is a testament to the power of purpose, discipline, and the courage to embrace change. Before we begin, don't forget, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on our latest videos. Now, let's embark on this incredible journey. Welcome to the show, Andreas.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Yasmin. It's a pleasure, and I'm grateful.
Firstly, Andreas, thank you so much for your book, Courage Through Crossroads. After reading it, I felt like I had the privilege to be able to follow you on your journey from Greece to the Big Apple, then to Tokyo, where I also lived, Taiwan, and back home to Malaysia. Through all your ups and downs in childhood, education, and even in your career, it also reminded me how much I loved the methods applied in ancient Greek philosophy, especially the application of logic and questioning it through conveying all these philosophical ideas, right? I love how you also juxtaposition everything, right? And I'm
Right.
going to just take the viewers as well through your book, and I'm sure if they are able to pick it up eventually, they would also love it. So in chapter 1, I read, I was born to replace a brother I had never met. My dad loved his land. He was at one with it. He loved his friends and put them above everything. As for my mother, her innate wisdom shone through her calmness. She kept the family together. My father's funeral was on a Sunday. How did your childhood shape you to be the person you are today, Andrea?
I grew up in a village. Life was very, very different back then. Electricity came to the village the year before I was born. I was born in 1966 in July. And so life was very, very different. The values is what kept us together. The family was very important. When I see the world changing today and I juxtapose it to what it was back then, it's just a very, very different scenario. Even though when we peel that onion of technology, success, what people want, at the end of the day, the basic core human need for happiness and contentment doesn't change. It doesn't really change. It's just the circumstances change and whatever tools we have around us change. That's all. The fundamental principles are exactly the same. So my childhood shaped me. At that time, I not at that time when I was a little kid, but when I was around 12, 13, 15, I hated farming. I hated the village. I hated all that. And I wanted to be in the city. I wanted to be a mathematician. I wanted to, do other things. How funny it is that now I wish I had all that land that dad managed to bit by bit gather and go and start a farm. You know what I mean? So here we are. Like the song says, right? I wish I knew then what I know now, but life has its own purpose, and so it brings us here. So it did shape me in many ways. It instilled a lot of values. Both mom and dad were an incredible catalyst, which I didn't realize back then. Of course, dad left early. I was 12 years old when he died. And like you read, mom kept the family together. Always, she was the silent, quiet force behind everybody. Um, and when I look back, the one who really, really shaped me was her. And the wisdom and everything that she would say to teach me, to force me to do things, when endless incidents of how she reacted to the things that I did. And of course, all of that realization came now. Um, it didn't come. I wish it would come to me when I was raising my son, but it
Mm.
didn't, because I was still, in that frame of mind that I know what I'm doing, and of course you don't. And like I said, I wish I knew then what I know now. It doesn't happen that way. So this, the universe has a plan. And now, very fundamentally, strongly believe that we need to leave ourselves to that and
Mm.
embrace it. And so when I started writing the book, it was because I started my own business, which is another interesting story. And I thought, if the business really needs to get established and be proper, and in this stature, I have to write a book. And since I'm going to be talking about leadership and awareness and all that, the book has to be about leadership. So I started writing a book about leadership. And about a month plus in writing, I realized that I was all a bunch of, I won't say the word, but you know what? And I read it again. I thought, oh my Lord, this is just absolute silliness. Like, the world doesn't need another book on leadership. You can go on Google and find a million gazillion things on everything about leadership. So who am I? And so I stopped. But that process made me realize that, wait, why don't I look back and write a story about my life and how did I arrive here? And through that, maybe put principles of leadership. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And of course, the book is the clean edition. I'm planning an unplugged edition, but that needs to be cleared by the lawyers first. And so I thought, why don't I do that? I'm an introvert. I'm a shy person, actually, believe it or not. And people who know me very well, they even don't believe that. I'm not the one who will go and fire up the party. I'm just going to observe first, right? And so I was very shy to write it. But then I thought, look, you push all your friends to write books. Uh,
Mm.
the late Tiam Hawk, the late Jeff Lee from Panasonic, and they did somehow, either books or articles. And I thought, okay, you push others, now it's your time, so you push yourself. So, not to write a book, but to write about my story. And I was very shy. I thought, okay, I'm not special. Okay, so a village boy, kampong boy. So what? There are million, billion kampong boys who make it, and they make it better than me. There are people who have no arms, no legs, like Nick Voyagic, and
Mm.
they climb up mountains. So what makes you special? And I thought, well, that's a self-limiting belief.
Mm.
I study and practice NLP, and that is in the core of what I live for
Mm.
now. And so I said to myself, do what you preach. So I
Mm.
started writing it. It didn't start with the first chapter. I just start interviewing myself to write stories and then filter it. And somewhere after a couple of months, this in the interview that I was doing to write the book, this thing about my brother came up. And only then I realized that bigger thing, that biggest veil in my life that I didn't realize before. I was made to replace somebody who died, and I was made intentionally for that reason. I was given the same name of that person. My brother, whom I've never met, his
Yeah.
name was Andreas too.
Yeah.
And so it was very intentional. And the pressure at that time unconsciously was very high. And I think that's why when I look back, I did what I did. That's why I did my revolution and my rebel days, just against everything.
Mm.
And I didn't realize it back then. The only time I truly realized it was it now. And it's funny how then you come to terms with it. It never really bothered me because I was always surrounded by love, always surrounded by a lot of compassion from the family, not necessarily from the outside, but even from the outside, people were very kind and generous in most of the ways.
Mm.
Um, However, I think internally it didn't work that way. I didn't realize that only now. And I thought, oh my goodness, here it is, right? The universe guides you to come to this point just to figure it out. And to
Yeah.
me, that was the biggest, for me personally, realization. And it was very, very, very cathartic. The journey of happiness truly started after that. That's why I say that whatever happened to me, it truly happened the last 3 years. And some friends who know me for years here in Malaysia for the last 19 years, they say, "Oh, wow, you changed. You're very different." I'm like, yeah, and it's good. So, yeah, it shaped me. The childhood shaped me. Mom and dad and the family, and I think the entire ecosystem at that time.
Mm.
Um,
When I read I was born to replace a brother I never had, I was so taken aback that I felt some sort of pain. You've
yeah.
never really mentioned how your brother passed on, but the fact that you were born to replace, it almost felt like, you could have never been born, right? It was
Yes.
just for that
Yes.
purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. If he wouldn't have died, I wouldn't be here.
Mm.
And he died from tuberculosis when he was, I reckon, around 17, 16, 17. So
Wow.
yeah. And he was the first son,
I
the
see.
first kid of the family. I have
Mm.
two sisters, and they were after him a couple of years apart. And so, in typical Greek old fashion, not anymore, but back then, like the first kid, first son,
Uh,
that's the most important thing. He carries the family name, etc. And so, he was a good student, he was a good son, he was a good
mm,
citizen, he was a good friend, he was a good singer, he played the harmonica, nice. And so, he was like the prodigy, and
yeah.
everybody loved him. And so they lost him. And so that pain and devastation for the family, not only for my father and mother, but also for my sisters. They
Mm,
adored him. He was the big brother. And apparently he took care of them and he was good and, all of that
mm,
stuff. He was just unbearable. And so imagine that pushing. My mom was old.
mm.
When I was born, she must have been like after 45, close to 50.
Oh, okay.
And so it was borderline, right? She had, from what I hear, she had two
Sister.
miscarriages, and then they kept trying. I have to have a son to replace that
Mm,
kid. So there was, and that's why I love the juxtaposition, right? And I put in the book, but I
mm,
didn't write anything on a juxtaposition. And I thought juxtaposition is so important because that pain of losing their son was all translated to endless love when
love.
they made
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, that love did not spoil me because I was not raised to be special. I
Yeah.
worked in the fields. My dad, I remember every September, used to give me a little bucket and he said, "You go and you gather the leftover grape seeds, the grapes that fall off when we gather them. And you fill it up and you put it with the rest." So I used to work since we were kids, not me, all of us. I was not
Mm,
special. So it was not like pampered, on the house with special privileges. And
mm.
yet the love was just immense. I could feel it everywhere.
It's interesting. I read about this whole
Yeah.
idea of selling and buying back, right? Even in the Indian culture, we also do this. It's almost like trying to ward off some sort of evil. But what was the preordained purpose you think your parents had aspired for you?
Oh boy. Most of it I don't know, to be honest. But
Mm,
yes, they sold me for a drachma, and it was about spelling the evil eye, just
mhm,
so we can start clean. I remember that day. I remember that day. I was a little kid. I don't remember the name of that lady that bought me and took me around and brought me back at the end of the day. Um, I remember clearly when I was growing up, I would stand up on a chair and the famous question of my dad and everybody is like, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" And I would say, "A farmer, agrotaki in Greek." And everybody was clapping, yay. So I think, I don't know. I think that my father made his land bit by bit with sweat and tears. He inherited a little bit, and then mom had a little bit, and then he made the rest. So I think that probably he would like to see me taking over the land and do stuff like that, probably, because that's what he knew. He was a farmer. We were
Yeah.
not rich people, but okay, going by all right, a respectful family. Um, so then he left. I was 12. So I don't know. That
Mm,
is always a big question mark in me. Like, how would my life be? First of all, if my brother, whom I've
mm,
never met, was not born, then probably
mm,
I wouldn't be here. And how would it be if dad wouldn't have died at that time? And he would, if because we stayed in the village, but it was very apparent that that was not it. It was just mom
mm,
and me. My sisters were gone, much older than me. And so it was a clear decision and the right decision to sell almost everything, pack up and go and all live in Athens in the big city,
mm,
which at that time I loved because I wanted to be a mathematician. And
mm,
so I don't know to that question, Yasmin, because
mm,
I never had a chance to live with him as a teenager,
mm.
to challenge him on the
Yeah.
values, to really know what he wanted. I'm dying to know, and if I would have one one wish would be to spend a day with him now to just understand what he really wanted. I don't know what he was aspiring for his first son.
Yeah.
Everything that I hear is filtered, from what my
Yeah.
sister tell me and all that. But there's always a filter of how they see things.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was open-minded. He loved books. He would spend a fortune on buying books for his daughter and his son and me. He
Mm,
would go to the capital, the big city, 1 hour drive with a bus to get books. He would come back with books.
mm,
And so he loved education. He loved progress. He loved people.
mm, mm.
He loved traveling, seeing things. And so maybe I think that if he would be by my side over this trip to the world in Asia, I think he would love it.
Yeah.
He was making friends very easy. Um, but I don't know what he was aspiring for me.
For-
Mom was very different.
Mm,
Mom was like, anything you do,
mm,
I'm happy with. Like she was happy for me. And sometimes that drove me crazy. Like I wanted her to tell me what to do. But no, everything, I was playing music like thrash metal and heavy metal. And oh, this is so beautiful. I'm like, Mom, you serious? So everything with love.
yeah.
I played my guitar and it was just like it was excellent tool to drive the cockroaches away. And she said, "Oh, it sounds so nice." I'm like, okay. So she was always happy for me. She never restricted me. She never asked me to do certain things or like, be a mathematician or be a doctor. Nothing like that. Even when I quit the university and I finally announced it, and she was in bed for 2 days, poor thing, I nearly killed her. She still said, if that's what you like, I wish you all the best in your journey.
Oh, that's so nice.
I would have killed my son,
I
you
know.
know.
Yes, yes.
And the culture, typical Indian culture, typical Chinese culture, typical Greek culture back then, you need to be a doctor.
Yes.
You need to be a lawyer. You need to work for the public sector. That's
Yes.
safe, you know, like Tenaga, like,
Nah.
Telecom, Malaysia, same, the equivalent.
Mm.
Nothing. Whatever you want to do. So here we are.
It was only his approval I sought, so I did everything to please him. Do you think you lost a sense of purpose after he had gone?
Yes. Don't make me cry, okay? Um,
Sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, I think I did. And I say in a part of that chapter that in his funeral I couldn't cry. I
Mm,
was just lost. I was sitting there, I remember, in the back room by myself, and everybody was in the big room where the coffin was, and typical fashion, all dressed in black, crying. all of that. People come in and out to pay the last respects. And I was there on the line, and the people would come in and shake your hand and say their condolences. And I was 12. And I'm like, what crap is this? What is all this about? So I left and I went to the next room and closed the door. I was by myself and I was just sitting there on the bed. I couldn't cry. And I pushed myself. I said, come on, you have to cry. I couldn't cry. I was feeling nothing. I was just numb. And I didn't know what to do. I was feeling lost because here I am on the cusp of being a teen, 13, right? I was 12. It was May, around there, June. And so the school ended. And next year, in September, starting school year, it would be the first class of high school, first year of high school. So that would be a different ball game. He wasn't there. I lost that guidance. I felt a gap, and mom eventually filled it up. I mean, she was always there, but at that time I didn't know. So the only thing that anchored me, and that's a blessing, was mathematics. And I think that the universe brought that to me on the last year of elementary school. He started getting sick in September. October, really, he was diagnosed, November. And then it took about 6, 7 months and he was gone. And during that time, my love for math was just immense. I loved it. And it anchored me because it had logic. I couldn't see the logic in anything that was happening around. The logic was gone. Like, why? The doctors couldn't do anything. He was healthy. He was working in the fields. Why would this happen to him? What's going to happen now? There was always sadness with death all around. I didn't like it. And so math gave me that anchor. And so he left. There was a big gap. And I got into the first year of high school, and I will never forget this. You're a teenager. I had a best friend at that time, Costas. We're sitting at the same desk and all that. And, you're a teenager, puberty kicks in, so your beard starts growing. And so did mine, a few hair here and there. And so did for my friend. So he comes one day in school and he was clean. And I'm like, oh, wow, you shaved. He said, no, my dad shaved me. He gave me the first shave of my life, and he taught me how to do it. Oh, I sunk. My dad was dead. There was nobody to do it for me. I'll never forget that day. I went home, and so I said to mom, I want a razor and shaving foam. Well, I don't have shaving foam. Said, I want a razor. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to shave. So I went to the bathroom. I put soap and cut myself, and I just shaved. And I was really crying because dad was not there to do the same thing that my friend's dad did for him. So it was a big gap, and I had to compensate for that and cover it. And it was apparent in many different ways. It was very obvious. But life was different back then. So you have to have tough upper lip, stiff, go on, keep going. And I was looking at mom, on the other hand, who had to hold the fort. When dad died in May, harvest time for the grapes is September. Harvest time for the olives is December. So now we're on our own. He's not there to manage anything. And so we had to do it. And it was her and me. My sisters were married, gone, and I was 12. So go figure. And I said, I think unconsciously I was saying to myself, what are you going to do? So you take a razor, shave yourself, and go help mom. That's the way it goes. And so I didn't have another option. There was not another option because now, with all this media and everything, you can sort of revert to a lot of things. Back then, what to do? You just do. There was no media, no this, no that, no the other. So you just move forward. And I think that also shaped me quite a bit. Yeah.
I think you had no option but to man up, right? And your friend kind of sort of stepped in and helped sort of fill that shoe, but yet you still had to be that father figure or that man figure in the family and help mom. Gosh, I can't imagine how that must have been. Yeah, so I read that you said, right after your dad's funeral, the next day you had to distribute donuts
Oh,
and something customary like that. I mean, I would have been so torn. How do I face my friends? And, being at the cusp of teenage, you have a little bit of pride already building up, and to lose someone that you're so attached and grown to love so much and really look up to, please, I couldn't imagine.
yeah. I remember that day. I remember that day so clearly. And that's a tradition. And so you take that, take the cookies, whatever, little muffins to school, and that's it. That's it. I was dying, and I was pleading with mom not to do it
Mm,
and not to go to school. So she let me have my way for a day or two, and they said you have to go to school and you have to do it, and that's it. I dreaded that because I didn't know. It was very confusing for me. I'm like, okay, do I go and stand there and cry? Well, that's what they expect me to do anyway. A
mm,
lot of misery. But then if I go there and I don't cry, well, that's also not good. Then I'm
mm,
not, I'm not missing my father. I'm not sad. That's also
mm,
not acceptable. So what are you supposed to do?
mm,
It was just a big fight inside me. I'll never forget that day. I did it. I don't remember if I cried or not cried. I don't remember that, but I did it. And I had to give the kulurakia, the
mm,
little muffins, whatever, to the kids. And you just stand there at the door, and I guess they were all kids lah. And so
mm,
everybody pretends to be adults and give you their condolences. Okay. And the day went
mm.
by. Yes.
In chapter 3, Rebellion, it was not an option for me to fail. I had to do what I had to do. Why did you feel like you could not fail?
I was made to replace somebody who's successful. And
Mm,
I I think that was inside me, but I didn't realize it. When when I went to the university,
mm,
stellar results on the exams. I never expected that. So everybody was happy. As soon as I got in, that particular goal was accomplished, and I didn't want anything else. I
mm,
realized that if I would if I would finish the university, the only thing I could be is like a math teacher or something with programming. At that time it was COBOL, if you remember. And I
mm,
didn't know what it was. I didn't like it. I didn't want that. So I quit. So I never went to the university. I went to one class, and
mm,
that's it. And I left. And so that was my rebellion time. It had to happen that way. I was 18. I could take my decisions. Um, I have proven myself to be a good student and a good this and a good that and the other. So this was my time to see the dark side. So there you go. Of course, I was with a family. Of course, every summer I was working in the fields to make pocket money, but I was doing my own thing. And I
mm,
said, the hell with it. I'll do whatever I want. I'll go from one bar to the other, follow the heavy metal bands and the rock bands that I like. I will drink with my friends,
mm,
outside until 5 in the morning. And that's what we were doing for a long time. And
mm,
of course, the one thing that pulled me back was my pride to be able to be self-content. You want to do your rebellion? Okay, that's fine. That's cool. I can do whatever I want, and I don't owe and own to anybody. And so I can't at the same time ask money from mom.
mm,
So if I want to be on my own, if I want to rent an apartment, if I want to buy food to eat, then work. So I was working in
mm,
everything possible to make money, to make a living. And so after being a complete rebel for 3 years, then I said, okay, now what?
Mm.
Um, Again, the universe has a way, right? Because it didn't happen like that. I got a motorcycle. I wanted to be easy rider, and so I got into an accident. I stayed 3 months in bed. And that was also a realization of how much the family unconditionally loved me.
Mm.
Because if my son would do to me what I have done to them, I would kill him myself again. And yet, their love was unconditional. So, my sisters, my mother. So, I stayed in bed for 3 months because you cannot walk. And
Mm.
so, what to do? How many books to read? How much TV to watch? You have to think.
Yeah.
Life universe said, okay, Buster, enough with this crap. It is time to slap you on the face so you can now wake up. And that's
Mm.
what it did. That's exactly what happened. So it pinned me down in bed for 3 months. And in that 3 months, I thought, okay, so I'm going to get up and do what? Same thing?
Mm.
Drink until 5 in the morning, do all sorts of stuff aimlessly. What? I'm going to die in another 30 years eating one souvlaki a day.
Mm.
And that was the time that I said, okay, you better shape it up. There was a lot of talk about going to the States to study. Everybody wanted me to study engineering and stuff like that. And that's when I discovered advertising. I said, no, this is what I want to do. And it
Mm.
was during these 3 months that the universe said, shut up, stay in bed and think. And that's where really everything happened. So now I look back, everything has a purpose, everything has a reason. That's why I say, I'm a fighter, right? I fight. When you tell me no, I have to know why. I have to push for a yes. I'm a salesman. I will have to go and do and succeed and achieve and all that. I take no is not an answer. And yet the universe pins you down and says, you got to accept. And now the more I accept
Mm.
and the more I embrace that with kindness, love, and honesty, like, okay la, it's not okay la. It is, yes, you must have a reason to say no. I respect that. I accept that. And every time I do it, all the doors are opening. It's like magic.
Mm.
Every time I push, it pushes me back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Amen.
always like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like that, Yasmin. I
I
was
know.
not. It was like it's literally the last 3 years. I was fighting for everything. I was fighting for new business. I was fighting for my team. You insult my team, you insult my family, so I will come after you. I was very different.
Mm.
And so it's, yeah.
I do this workshop called Rewriting Your Stories, and every time they look back and we do something like looking back on your past, and it's almost like a narrative of what you have been telling and what your life has been.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, people always find something very different, and they're like,
Yeah.
I never thought of me this way, and it completely changes their perspective of
Yeah.
who they are. And yeah, when I read your book, and I think that's the exact progression that it took you to change you to be who you are today. Because
Yeah.
as you look back, you'll be like, was I that guy? And do I want to be that guy? And then you start
Yeah.
questioning a lot of things, right?
Yeah. But for whoever is listening, don't question yourself with regret. Question yourself with
Yeah.
gratitude, because everything happens for a reason. That's the premise. And it's there. It's there for us to understand and learn. And when we forget and when we forgive and we move on, first
Yeah.
and foremost, we do it for us, for
Yeah.
ourselves. And
Yeah.
when we do it like that, it took me, the biggest challenge I've ever had was this forgive and forget. I'm like, okay, maybe I will forgive. How can I forget?
Mm.
People who done me wrong, at least what I think.
Mhm.
How can I forgive? How can I forget? Yes, you can, because you end up doing that for yourself, not for the
Mm.
others. Then the
Yeah.
rest. So, and what you do, Jasmine, is cathartic, because the questions you ask, like you ask me questions I never thought, right? And
Mm.
you make me think even right now. And as great people say, I think Young said that, we are what we do, right? And doing is the action is the real measure of intelligence. However, we do not learn by doing, never.
Yeah.
The only way we learn from is by reflecting,
Yeah.
nothing else. And so if we don't reflect to really understand our strategies, why did we do what we did, what made us the way we are, what are values and belief systems that guide our behavior, then we will never progress. And there are many people who don't reflect because
Yeah.
reflection can be tough.
Tough. Yeah.
And yeah, and when you see yourself naked in the mirror, it's like, wow, do I? How many times do we do that? Emotionally and physically. And I'm not joking. It's not easy. And really look at ourselves in the mirror and reflect. What do we want? What we are? What decisions we take? So reflection is key. And Yasmin, you make that so good. And that's why, in your experience, people leave your podcast thinking. And that leads to change. That leads to transformation. That leads to self-awareness. And self-awareness is by far where everything starts. Without self-awareness, nothing happens. Without reflection, nothing happens. And
Yeah.
so that's extremely critical.
Thank you so much for taking your time to be on the show, Andreas. I have nothing to say but that I thoroughly enjoyed, this conversation with you, and with you imparting so much knowledge and sharing everything so raw, right? So openly with us on this show. And I think we have so much to learn from you, and so much takeaways, not just on this last couple of bits of points. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get connected to and learn more about what Andreas do, I'm going to drop in the links down below. Andrea's journey is a powerful reminder that life's crossroads are not the end, but the beginning of new chapters. His story teaches us that with courage, resilience, and a willingness to learn, we can overcome any obstacles and find our true purpose. If Andrea's story has inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and comment below with your thoughts or experiences with Life Crossroads. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one, please do. Until next time, keep pushing forward and never stop believing in the power of transformation. Thank you so much again, Andreas, and
Thank you.
bye bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.